Hi guys, welcome to your next session of Your Health is Lit.
Woo!
So we are so excited today. We have Dr. Brittany Blue with us.
Hi.
She is going to talk to us about prematurity in Black America and how prematurity rates are affecting us. Today is National NICU Nurses Day.
Yes. Happy National NICU Nurses Day.
Woo!
Former
Yes.
NICU
Yes,
Awesome.
yes. I love labor of love. That's all I'm gonna say. I can talk about it all day.
We could.
We have so many stories.
Yeah.
We're gonna talk. So I'm gonna let Brittany introduce herself and
Yes.
yeah.
Well, hi, my name is Brittany Blue, or some know me as Dr. Brittany Blue. And yes, I'm a neonatologist, and I guess we'll talk about that a little bit later.
Yeah.
But first, I am a wife, and I'm a mom, and
Yeah.
a Georgia peach. So,
Hey.
I had been all around the place. So I grew up in Georgia, and then went to New Orleans for undergrad, and I am a Katrina survivor.
What?
And then moved. We could.
Yeah.
Good. Went to medical school at a place called Meharry Medical College. Shout out to the HBCUs.
Hey.
Yes.
Yeah. And there I met my husband and my classmate Brandon. Yeah.
I didn't know this love story.
Yeah. We were classmates.
Brandon.
We were classmates. Yeah. So he was my study buddy, and then he asked me to marry him. It was a long story for another time, but yeah. So then after medical school, we had to continue our training. So that's when we relocated up to St. Louis, where we did our residency, and he did adult medicine, and I stayed with pediatrics. And then I did 3 years of that, and then following that, I wanted to continue my training in a subspecialty called neonatology, but I stayed in St. Louis for an additional 3 more years for training with that, and that's what I do right now.
And that's how I met you.
Yes, that's how
we were
met.
babies. We were like babies in our careers. I was a patient care tech, and you
Yes.
were a resident.
Sharla met me when I was still well rested and excited, and I'm still excited, but it was a different kind of excitement.
Yeah.
It was like,
I'm gonna save all these babies. You're
Yes,
like,
a
y'all do
naive.
anything you need.
a naive type of excited, and yeah, Sharla seen me at my worst. Yeah. But you know, we grew up together.
We did.
Actually.
At St. Louis Children's Hospital.
So she started out as a tech on the pulmonary floor.
Yes.
And I rotated through there, and then we came together again long term in the NICU, which was very near and dear to both of our hearts.
Oh my gosh, so many crazy nights.
Yes, wonderful nights, but crazy. Yes. Yes. And then you know, it was just meant to be for us to be close together.
Yeah.
So, and then I relocated here to Tampa.
I said, Brittany, you better. I'm moving. You better come to Tampa. And then she said,
yeah, she knew before everybody else knew
like,
that we were planning on
moving. Probably like a year or two. I was like, okay, I'll be waiting. So now, look at us.
Yeah, so we are honoring this month, I guess.
Yeah.
And this special day by talking about prematurity.
Yes. So, I know Donna wanted to talk more about what neonatology was.
Yeah. So what is a neonatologist for those who don't know?
Yes, excellent question. So a neonatologist is a doctor who specializes in taking care of newborn babies and premature babies and critically sick or really, really ill newborn babies. So we take care of babies that are born on time, that come out who are just really sick, whether it's breathing issues, issues with the brain, issues with the heart, the gut, any organ system really. And we also take care of babies who are born too soon. So babies potentially born essentially 3 months before their due date, we can take care of. So that's what a neonatologist is. So we primarily work within the hospital in the acute setting, but there are some places where we will actually follow babies after they've graduated from a NICU. So when they've
graduation.
Exactly. So when babies get well enough to leave their hospital stay, we will sometimes follow them afterwards because it's important to see how they grow and develop afterwards. So sometimes there are a couple of toddlers I've followed previously. So
So Brittany and I both took care of Keaton. I know that everybody was like so impressed with the segment that we did with Kindness. So shout out to Kindness, because we all love
that segment was awesome.
Yeah, we all love your baby.
Yeah.
So I know a lot of people don't realize like how much prematurity affects our community. So can you just kind of discuss like the percentage differences between like prematurity in Black communities versus white communities?
Yes, absolutely, absolutely. And I think you touched on this actually in the last video. So a full-term pregnancy is essentially 40 weeks. So a premature baby is anything less than 37 weeks. And usually when you toe that line, those babies come out and they look relatively normal. But anything less than 37 weeks is what we consider premature. And we know that those babies, even if they act normal, they don't do things completely the same as a baby who's born on time. And so prematurity affects essentially 10% of all births in the United States. But what we do know is that prematurity disproportionately affects African American females or women in general. And so what does that mean? So when you look at those numbers, essentially 16% of babies born to African American women are premature. As opposed to Caucasians, I think that number is closer to 9% or 8%.
That's almost half.
That is.
Yeah.
And in fact, if you're African American, you're like 50 or 60% more likely to have a premature baby than your white counterparts.
Yeah.
And that's really hard to figure out why that is. And a lot of people have studied it, but it's absolutely unacceptable that something as simple as race can affect, your chances of being born premature and ultimately, the layout for your entire life.
Right. So what are some things that we can do to modify, some of or what are some risk factors? What are some risk factors to prematurity, just to even begin with?
That's a good question. So, a big risk factor is socioeconomic status, and having the ability to have good, routine, regular follow-up with your I can't speak. Your OB.
Yeah.
Yeah. So having good follow-up with your doctor before the baby even comes out. And so if you're having a hard time having access to that care, that's going to put you at higher risk for having a baby prematurely. And before we even go on, one of the things I did want to mention that is really important is developing a rapport with your doctor before your baby comes out. And I know one of the big things that has kind of been in the news lately is these celebrities who have something called toxemia.
Oh yeah, Beyonce, the Beehive.
Yes.
And Serena.
Yes. It was. Yeah. So that's a big deal, right? Because so one, if you are busy taking care of your family, or if you are having issues with transportation and you don't have a car and your only means of transportation is a bus or walking, it's hard to put yourself first and get to these doctor's appointments. And so that's one thing, because when you're pregnant, your doctor needs to monitor you for certain things. And if any of these things start to get kind of out of balance and out of whack, then it's hard to pick up on that. And then two, I think us as Black females, we are natural providers, we are nurturers, and we typically put ourselves last. And we oftentimes ignore our own symptoms because we're so busy of taking care of other people. And you really can't do that when you're pregnant, because it puts your life in danger and it puts your baby life in danger. So socioeconomic status can play a role into this. But I will say, people have looked at it, they've broken it down. So if you have someone who lives in a low-income home who's Black and who is a low-income household who is white, the chance of prematurity is going to be higher for that Black individual.
Still.
But but here's the thing, but here's the other thing too. Us, and I'm sure as a lot of our listeners out here who are professionals, who are well educated, when you correct for those factors, there's still something there. So in comparison to our white counterparts, we are still at higher risk for prematurity.
Right.
And that's the factor that people can't figure out what it is.
Right.
But it's, you know, that's another reason why it's important to follow up with your doctor prenatally, because you also want to make sure that your doctor and you have developed that rapport. Right. Because when you present yourself, you want somebody who can advocate for you when you are feeling off. Because sometimes it might not be anything measurable. It just might be something you feel that is different. And you want to be able to have a doctor who goes to bat for you. And that only happens when you've done your research, you've vetted who is taking care of you, and you've had routine follow-up. So that person has gotten to know you as well. Because as much as I would hate to say it, there are plenty of times when women have no prenatal care, and they show up to a place like an emergency room, and they're telling someone who does not know them that they feel off or different. And a lot of times their symptoms are downplayed. Right. And that's where we can sometimes run into issues as well.
I think a big thing, I know, like speaking to patients that don't have prenatal care, so in my current position, I round in the morning, and so I go see the babies. I no longer do the NICU. I will send your baby to the NICU if your baby starts cutting up. But I will. I'm like, and I'm like, oh, you need to go upstairs. So I go through the charts, and I have to search the prenatal history, and there are so many, you know, patients that don't have prenatal care or that have comorbidities. If you're not taking care of your blood pressure, like before you're pregnant, it's going to be an issue while you're pregnant. Like, it amplifies any issues that you have. And so we have these, you know, these moms that come, and before they're even pregnant, they have like hypertension, diabetes, glaucoma, like all of these things, and they're taking these medications, and all of that plays into part. So I think, you know, even before you start to plan a pregnancy, like, you need to make sure that you have like your health together, period, which is why we have these conversations. Like, I have hypertension. There are steps that I have to take, you know, to make sure that whenever we decide that we're going to have babies, shout out to my mom, because she's here for you any day. But there are just steps that I have to take. And, you know, and every time I go, even for my well women exams, there are a lot of, especially Black women, that don't even go for their yearly PAPs. Like, go. Yeah. Because in those visits, you know, me and my OB, we always talk about, okay, what's the plan on babies? What are we going to do? Like, we've already had that conversation. And she's even had that conversation with my husband to prepare him for, like, this is what we're going to do, why we're going to do it, because it's a lot easier to take that information in when you're not in the situation. Yes. And so I think taking care of those comorbidities early can definitely play a role. Like, you need to take care of yourself before the baby's even
exactly
there.
And that's actually an excellent point. Like, so prenatal care happens before you get pregnant. So taking your prenatal vitamins, you're actually supposed to start taking those 3 months before you plan on becoming pregnant. Oh, wow. And that's even if this is a planned pregnancy. Right. So if you're a woman in childbearing age, most obstetricians will tell you to just take a prenatal vitamin, because you don't know when you're going to get pregnant. Exactly. And you know, prenatal vitamins are important. They have things like iron in it. They have things like folic acid. And those are important all for baby's development. So yeah, I think that is an excellent point, that the prenatal care starts even before you're pregnant, and taking care of yourself. And I think one of the other things you were mentioning, or, you know, because it is kind of a catch-22. We're, as Black women, we're at higher risk. And there is some factor out there that for whatever reason we're higher. And even if we try to control for things like education, socioeconomic status, that we can't completely eliminate. But there are a couple of other things we can do to help. So one of those other things is avoiding teen pregnancy. So teenagers are at higher risk of having babies prematurely, as well as having all kinds of other issues that kind of go along with being a teenager with a baby. And so if you're a teen, protect yourself. Like, know your health, get tested, because you don't know what your partner's doing. Get tested frequently, and protect yourself. Know what, you know, bring the condoms with you. Don't wait for your male partner to bring the condoms already be proactive about it. If you've made the decision,
you shouldn't be having sex.
But if you are, they should protect themselves.
Thank you, Donna.
Because we try to promote abstinence, but we don't promote contraceptives, and that's the big thing that we need to do.
This is a conversation that I have with my teens. Are you having sex? The safest way to be is to not have sex.
Okay.
If you are going to have sex, you need to talk to your mom, somebody, because when you decide to do adult things, we have to have adult conversations. I had an 8-year-old in my office who told she's pregnant. Like, so she came in, she thought she was pregnant. She's pregnant. And so I was talking to her. Of course, she was a young Black girl. And I said, so what are you going to do? Like, what are you doing? Like, school? Are you still in high school? Like, what's going on? Are you and dad together? Are y'all going to get married? And she said, girl, we too young to get married. You
too young to be having a baby.
Girl, we too young to be thinking about that. You're pregnant. If you cannot put together the fact that you should, you're doing this adult thing, you shouldn't be having sex. So I always promote abstinence, but then I always say, like, but if you're going to do it, you need to talk to somebody about it. Because you're like,
give them those options.
I don't want to talk to nobody about it. Then you can't, like, if you are going to do adult things, there are adult conversations that need to happen.
Correct.
Agree.
And don't be afraid to talk to your parents about it. That's the thing. And parents, don't be afraid to talk to your children about it.
Right.
Oftentimes, and I'm sure you're starting to see this too, when I used to do general pediatrics and I would see teenagers in the office, you know, a lot of teenagers actually don't quite understand sex. And unfortunately, the school system doesn't teach it in a way that that makes it comfortable to talk about.
And I think in our community, it's like, don't bring no babies in my house. The end. Like
no sex before marriage.
A lot of parents are like, sex, don't do it.
Yeah.
And that's the end of the conversation when it's really like, look, I know you're getting a tingle in your body and you want to know.
Yeah.
And I'm telling you, it's not worth it. Like, I had a 15-year-old in my office and I was like, girl, whatever the boys are telling you, I'm just here to tell you it's a lie. Whatever it is, they're lying. Because I was like, there's so many things. And, you know, and I try to, like, you know, of course they laugh at me, but we try to have those conversations, even in my 5 to 10 minutes with seeing these kids, to tell them, like, you know, I know what they're saying. I'm telling you, girl, 10 years from now, you will be like, oh, I remember when she told me that was a lie.
Right.
Like, it's a lie. So, you know, just trying to kind of make the atmosphere to where we can talk about that kind of stuff, about what boys are saying and all of that. Because a lot of moms, when I ask the teenagers, I'll ask them, like, you know, is there anything that you need to talk to me about your mom in the room, or, you know, anything going on with your body that you have questions about? And we just do this awkward, like, 3-way stare. And they're like, nah. Like, you know,
but it's okay.
Yeah,
it's okay to ask. It's okay to, we encourage you to have your parents in the room when you talk about it, but it's also okay to ask them to step out. Right. What we want you to do is to have the conversation with somebody.
That's an adult.
I think we need to normalize it, because people think that is not normal.
Because in our community, it is not like, mom, you not be having sex.
Even me, I didn't even have the sex conversation with my parents. Which I wish I would have. So I don't know. I guess it's just maybe an African American thing where we don't talk to our kids about sex, and we just kind of brush it under the rug. So
it's like, don't do it. Don't bring no babies in my house. Finish high school. I mean, and I asked with that same girl, I was like, so how does your mom feel? And she's like, well, she's just happy I finished high school. And I'm like, I was just like, dang, like that bar is so low. Like the expectation, like, no.
Yeah, and I'll even push you a step further. So I start this conversation when they're 10, 11, 12.
Yeah.
Because the thing is, you want to talk to them before it has happened. And unfortunately, even at 10, 11, 12, it's already happened.
They are. There was a sermon that I was watching, and the pastor was talking about how we don't talk about sex in the church. And he said, if you don't think that your 6th grader isn't already knowing or doesn't know anything about sex, you're wrong.
Right.
And he's finding it out from other 6th graders.
Right.
So either we're going to have the conversation with these kids, or we're going to let other 10
other people
talk to them about sex. And they have no real knowledge.
Exactly.
So we have to take control of that.
Yeah. So this is our challenge to you parents out there of teenagers. Have that conversation. Have that conversation.
And not to where they're scared. Because some people are so scared, like they're like, But then whenever we do a lot of screening tests. So when our teenagers come in, we usually screen them for gonorrhea and chlamydia, because I work in the inner city. So everybody over a certain age gets a gonorrhea and chlamydia screening. And when I was working out up north, so before where I was at now, the kid was like 14, and he denied. And then I had to call him and his mama back, and I was like, I need you guys to come in because you're doing something.
Yeah,
you're doing something.
And and a lot of it too is this would be a great next series that we can talk about. Is what diseases are curable, what aren't curable, and like what is sex? Because there's different.
That's a good topic. I like that.
Blue is out here.
I'm having this sex.
That's education 101.
Yes,
but it is because there are a lot of kids out there doing stuff that they don't think is sex.
Yeah,
but it is sex.
Oh, he just. I'm not gonna say it.
Right.
Yeah, but he just.
It is.
I'm like, that's sex.
Yes.
Still. Yes. Yeah. And you're still exposing yourself to disease.
Exactly.
It doesn't take for like intercourse to happen for you to be exposed to diseases.
And condoms don't protect you against everything either.
Yeah.
Nope.
But you know what does? Not having
accidents.
Oh man.
Yes. So anyway, I think we went on a little segue.
I think we did too.
So being a teenager increases your risk of prematurity. Okay. Other things that do it is if you are not waiting enough time between pregnancies. So typically my OB colleagues typically recommend waiting at least 6 months of uterine rest from having your last baby to starting to get pregnant with your other ones. So if you're having babies back to back and you're not allowing good time for your uterus and your cervix to kind of go back to what it was doing,
snap back.
Exactly. You're putting yourself at risk for prematurity. For parents out there who are doing things like IVF, in vitro fertilization, that puts you at higher risk. Multiples, so if they're twins or triplets, that puts you at higher risk as well. So those are some of the common things that put you at risk. Now, along with comorbidities, so things like obesity, high blood pressure will also put you at risk for preterm.
People don't think obesity is like, they're like, they don't think that's a big deal. Fat babies don't automatically mean that they're well.
Correct.
But sometimes the big ones are the worst.
Yeah.
The worst.
So there could be a lot of issues with that. So we do have premature babies who are, quote, bigger. And we also have premature babies who are born to moms who are diabetic, whose diabetes are so bad, the babies actually aren't born bigger, they're actually born smaller. And we actually run into a lot of issues with that as well. And
trying to regulate their sugars. I just think when people see big babies, they're like, oh, that baby's healthy. No,
not all the time.
Not all the time.
Not all the time.
That's no. Michelin Man should not be showing up like that lady that had the 12-pound baby.
Oh gosh.
Yeah, like I was like, that's a toddler.
Yes.
No.
So how does prematurity affect children long term?
Yeah, so that's a good question. So it does depend on how premature that they are. One of the biggest issues that we run into with premature babies is breathing issues. So babies' lungs take time to mature, and the earlier that they're born, the less mature those lungs are. And so sometimes this means babies need support as far as like oxygen and pressure when they're born, and sometimes they need a lot of help. So those babies who are born closer to a month or 2 months before their due date sometimes need the help of like a breathing tube to help them breathe. And I know one of the things we had talked about in the last series with like kindness in regards to Keaton was he had something called bronchopulmonary dysplasia. And that just basically means that the lungs developed abnormally because they had to learn how to adapt with him being on the outside instead of on the inside. And when you have a really severe case of that, sometimes babies do need tracheostomies or breathing tubes up here in their necks to help them out with that. And that could be a lifelong issue. So that means these babies are at higher risk of things like asthma. And a lot of times they present with symptoms that are similar to asthma. When they get things like the common cold that you and I would get, and you know, it knocks us out for a couple of days, unless, you know, you have asthma.
No, but I was gonna say, I just remember, do you remember when we had to shut down the NICU for siblings coming?
Yeah.
Because somebody's sibling brought a cold virus.
Yeah.
And it literally it will kill a NICU baby. It can kill a NICU baby. And so we had to like stop letting siblings come. I just was thinking like, oh my gosh, I just see yellow gowns everywhere. Everybody's on isolation, like, because literally these babies, like a cold that to where you just don't feel good, it will kill a NICU baby. It can kill them.
Yeah. And you know, we are approaching flu season now, and they're actually starting to see cases of the flu now in Florida. And so the flu virus is going to be the most severe in babies who are essentially less than 3 years old. And by most severe, I mean, like, this isn't just like, oh, I feel terrible for a couple of days. We're talking about breathing issues, oxygen, ventilators, pneumonia, death. So this is a big deal. And so this is one of the issues that faces babies who are born premature, and a lot of stuff that they can outgrow. So premature babies who do have breathing issues when they first come out, they could still live relatively full and healthy lives. But there is still going to always be some component of breathing issue that's always there. It just kind of depends on the severity. The other things that premature babies are at risk for are, depending on how young they are, could be like bleeding issues, particularly in their brain. So depending on how premature they are, those blood vessels just aren't fully developed. And so sometimes you'll hear people talk about something called cerebral palsy. And there's really a spectrum. So really pure cerebral palsy is like an issue of tone and muscles, and not necessarily with thinking. So when you see people who have tightness and stiffness in their arms and legs, that's what we refer to as cerebral palsy. Now, depending on the type of bleed and where it is, it can place a premature baby at risk for developmental issues and cognitive or thinking issues. And that's where you see the kids who are also having learning disabilities. So prematurity in itself will put a baby at risk for that, even if they don't even have a brain bleed. And that's important because, you know, as they continue to grow up and go through school, you know, we really want to make sure that our kids and our young folks are out there and we're optimizing their learning. And so being disproportionately affected by prematurity also places our kids at higher risk for those learning issues.
ADHD.
Right, ADHD, autism spectrum, and like I said, cerebral palsy as well. And there are a couple of other issues that can go along that affects babies who are born prematurely. Essentially, every single organ system can be affected: the heart, the gut, the skin, and infection can affect a premature baby. But those are just some of the highlights.
Infection is really like something really big. That sounds like, oh man, we need to put all these babies on isolation because their immune systems are not fully developed. Like, we have to be even more careful with just exposing them to things, which is why we're about to do this. We're about to take a segue again.
Oh, let's do it. Let's do it.
Which is why you need to vaccinate your kids.
Yes.
Before you send them into my NICU to these babies that don't have a choice. What do you say to your patients when they say, oh, I don't get my flu shot because I got it and it made me sick?
So it all goes back to like, what is a flu shot and what is in it? So basically, I want you to think of like a present, okay? So think of a present that's wrapped up in a bow. Yeah, wrapped up in a bow. Okay? So a flu shot can make you feel a little off, but it will not give you the flu. So a flu shot is essentially, I'm presenting you with the package. Ooh. So there's actually no gift in your present.
Oh, what? But gift? Just
tell me how. Yeah. But it's the box and it's the bow.
Right.
Because your body is recognizing the outside of that present. So if you're encountered with the flu shot, which is the present with the gift inside, that sick gift inside, your body's like, I've seen that present before, and I know that present's no good.
Yeah.
So I don't want that. So your body attacks it with antibodies, and it takes time. This is why we recommend the flu shot, because when you present somebody with the flu shot, it tells your body to create these antibodies, and that just takes time. That doesn't happen instantaneously. Right. But that response that's happening, where you're making these antibodies, that's that feeling sometimes people get when they feel a little off, they feel a little bit achy after their flu shot. It's because actually your body thinks that it's encountered the flu, but it hasn't. So it's mounting that response. So that way, when you do a couple weeks later, you know, you're walking in the store, you put your hand on that Publix cart and you touch the hand of somebody who has, you know, touch the surface where somebody has the flu.
And then you rub your nose.
Exactly.
And now you've introduced yourself to the flu.
Exactly.
You don't get the flu.
Exactly. Because your body is already seeing the package.
Right.
So those antibodies are already floating around. They stick to it and they don't allow that virus to enter the cells and cause the disease. So the first thing I say is, why don't you want to get the flu shot? And that's a common thing. And so that's easy. Like the flu shot just doesn't give you the flu.
Somebody told me this week, Yahweh told them not to get it. And I was like,
no.
Don't be lying on my Jesus. That.
Exactly.
These are the answers that I get every day. No.
We didn't. And I mean, this is just a different way of presenting it to you. This is a direct way of presenting it to your body.
Right.
This is like, being exposed to a germ, let's just say a germ per se, when you go and you touch a doorknob. But we're being intentional with what we're presenting to your body.
Right.
And we're actually using that intention that Yahweh gave you
in
a way that will protect you.
Yeah.
And so that's one of the reasons. The other thing is too, people will be like, well, I just don't get the flu. I've never gotten the flu. So the flu is a different strain every year. Mm-hmm. So the outside of that package, it changes every year. 1 year it's a red covering, 1 year it's a green covering, 1 year it's got sparkles. Some years it's more virulent or more sickening than other years. And so it can change from season to season. And so that's why you have to get it every year. Yeah. Because what they do is the CDC looks across the world and see what kind of flu strains that they're getting over there. And they say, well, in 6 months, we're going to get that strain. What are they seeing? Are they seeing more flu A? Are they seeing more flu B?
Right.
We're going to try to create a vaccine that is going to specifically cover the ones that we're seeing across the way.
Yeah.
Now, what you might hear on the media is that a particular flu shot doesn't completely cover the vaccine because we're guessing. And that's the truth is we have epidemiologists, people who study it, and they try their best to guess what kind of strain is going to hit us. Mm-hmm. And sometimes, the chances of us getting it is like 80%. Sometimes it's 60%. Either way, even if we miss it, it's still better than not having the flu shot because the illness you get won't be nearly as sick as if you never got the flu shot in the first place.
It helps lessen the symptoms.
Exactly.
Like even if you do get a strain of the flu that isn't included in the flu shot, you probably only feel sick for a couple days.
Right.
You ended up in the ICU on a ventilator. Like the flu killed 180 kids, 180 last season.
Yeah.
So let me ask you something. So last week at work, we're doing a flu initiative, and I had a patient who said that she doesn't get the flu shot because she's allergic to eggs. So she's not getting the flu shot. So have you ever heard of that?
Actually, yeah, I think if you're allergic to eggs I think there's the main, that's not what I'm thinking. Yeah, one of the main ingredients is like egg base. Mm-hmm. And I honestly have to go back and look, but I think there are some preservatives that don't contain that particular
Yeah, because I was going to say something came out. I'll post. That's actually a really good question.
Yeah.
I will post.
And that is a legit thing. That is a legit thing to say. But I think they're
coming away from using the egg base because I have to ask because we just got an email where they said the egg thing is no longer an issue. So I have to look at it.
Yeah.
It was Friday.
Yeah. Well, we can follow up on that. But I mean, you can't, because if you do have a true allergy to the flu shot, then that's different. Because we don't want to put your life at risk.
Right.
And
if you have a true allergy though, then you are really, counting on the rest of us.
Correct.
To get
that was my next point.
Because you cannot.
Yeah. Right. And this kind of, and we'll do this another day, going into like our whole measles and all the other vaccines.
We're here for it.
But there is something called herd immunity. And the fact of the matter is there's a lot of people out there who just cannot get the flu shot. So children less than 6 months aren't able to get the flu shot. Mm-hmm. These are our babies who are at higher risk, the highest risk of getting sick. Mm-hmm. People who are immunocompromised, people who have cancer, people whose children and adults and teenagers who genetically don't even have an immune system, who aren't able to get the flu shot. These are the people we need to be protecting. Mm-hmm. So, you know, you might have, you know, you might think that Yahweh doesn't want you to get it. That's not the fact. It's really that there are some people who physically cannot get it, and they're depending on people like us to get the shot to protect them and to protect yourselves.
Yeah. Okay, so speaking of protecting ourselves, I know we kind of touched on it, on like how self-care can roll into, you know, the prematurity risk because we don't take care of ourselves. What are some things that we can modify? Like, what are some, if somebody's like, okay, I know we have this risk, what are some things that our listeners can take and say, okay, oh yeah, I can do that. I know we talked about taking a prenatal vitamin. Mm-hmm. Just take one every day, even if you're on birth control. Like, just take it, because you never know.
You never know. Birth control is not 100%.
Yeah, so I know we talked about, like, you know, taking a prenatal vitamin every day in those childbearing years, which is like what, like 18 to, or would you recommend teenagers?
I mean, probably not teenagers, because though technically they are childbearing, but you know, 18 until, I mean, people are having babies later and later. So that is more of an OB question, but certainly if you're, you know, less than 45, you should be taking a prenatal vitamin. Okay. It's probably not a bad idea to take one.
Yeah. So what other things can people modify in regards to like modifying their risk for prematurity?
Yeah. And I talked about it a little bit earlier. One is making sure you develop a relationship with an OB doctor. And that's important because, you know, if you become pregnant, ideally they want to see you within that first trimester, and that's before, you know, week 12 and less. And that's for multiple things, but making sure that you routinely follow up with your doctor, and then taking care of yourself. So it's hard because we're always busy. We're on the run all the time. We're taking care of everybody else, but making good, healthy choices. If you smoke, you know, at least reducing it, at least trying to reduce, ideally trying to quit, because, you know, smoking also affects your baby in utero, but also once they're born, it can also affect them. You know, taking care of blood pressure issues. If you do have high blood pressure, you know, trying to work out, drink plenty of water, being on the right medications for that. Trying to think of what else really will help modify for it. And not ignoring your symptoms. So if you feel off, if you're pregnant and you have a headache, or, you know, things look a little blurry, or you're seeing spots, if you feel more puffy or swollen, like don't just go get checked out. Don't try to make excuses for those symptoms. Don't say, oh, you know,
I ate Fritos today. So
exactly, right?
I
ate more salt. No, like go get that checked out, because the babies who do the best are those that are brought to attention sooner instead of at the last minute. And so not ignoring your symptoms and getting checked out sooner than later will help you out. And knowing that you have a doctor that is going to advocate for you because they know you is also going to be really helpful with that as well.
Yeah. I know we kind of talked about Beyonce and Sonia a little bit. First of all, I love Beyonce. Me and my sister, we are Beehive members with gold cards. Gold cards, Beehive members. But for people that don't know, you know, what happened in their pregnancies, can you kind of like shed light on what toxemia is and why it really was a big deal, even though they look amazing now? Yeah. I need that.
Yeah.
That snatch bag. Yeah. But they really were at risk, and their babies were really at risk. It really was severe. For sure. Right.
Yeah. So toxemia is like an old term for something called preeclampsia. And we don't know what causes preeclampsia. We know that Black women are at higher risk for getting preeclampsia. But essentially what happens is your blood pressure gets really high. Your blood pressure gets really high. You can potentially have some inflammation of your liver. You can start, your kidneys become more leaky. And that's essentially what makes you more puffy. And that's why people start seeing more puffiness. And sometimes it can lead to headaches. And it can lead to blurry vision because your blood pressure is so high. And the reason it's dangerous is because preeclampsia could put you at higher risk for something called eclampsia. And that's all those symptoms plus seizures.
I was like, yes.
And that is very bad. That is very bad, because obviously if you're having seizures, you're compromising, one, your brain, and two, your oxygen, not only to yourself, but to your baby. And so, you know, I didn't keep up with all the tabloids with them, but Beyonce was at high risk because one, she's Black or Creole or French.
Yes.
And she had twins. So that puts her at risk.
And she's older. How old is she? She's turned like what, 36?
Oh, don't put her out
there. That's not old.
She's not old.
No, what do we consider
AMA is 35. But I didn't
wow, okay.
So
I guess my clock is ticking.
Yes. And then
maternal age is a risk factor.
Exactly. And first time moms.
Yeah.
So Serena was at risk for it because she's Black and she was a first time mom.
Right.
And so those types of things put you at risk for preeclampsia.
Yeah. And what's crazy is like they work out. Like they're in shape. They're like
they do everything. Right.
Yeah, they're like they're in shape,
right.
and it still happened to them.
Right.
So that's really, I mean, I do love Beyonce, but that really to me is dang, like even Serena,
nobody is immune to nobody is
athletic. They work out. It's not just, it's not just people in the community that they have money, so it's not socioeconomic status, like, and they have chefs and all of that access to things that we don't have, and it's still happened to them.
Right.
So that's why it's important.
And here's the other thing too, not a whole lot of people know, is so the way you treat preeclampsia is you deliver your baby. That's how you get rid of it, essentially. So sometimes that means babies are born prematurely, and if it's caught when the baby is at term, then you deliver the baby. But there are a couple people who actually have preeclampsia afterwards. It can happen up to 6 weeks after delivery. So even after you had your baby, if you feel a little off, but you're trying to be a super mom and do everything for the baby, don't ignore your symptoms. And this is also why it's important to have that follow-up after you've delivered your baby, because you're still at risk for different diseases and things that are out there.
And I think it's hard too, just like culturally, some of the research that I was doing, a lot of Black moms, particularly in like lower socioeconomic, statuses, they don't have the jobs to where they can get the time off to fully recover. They have to get back to work. A lot of moms, they're single moms, so they don't even have the support system around them to where they have people that can say, girl, you look puffy, or you look like something looks off. They have to go back to work because they have to feed these kids, because they have all of these other things that they have to do. And I just always tell patients, like, what will your kids do if you are not here at all?
Exactly.
Like, yes, like that's horrible about the job and all of that, but your kids need you here. Like, what would you do? And I actually had a really scary situation with a mom a couple weeks ago in the hospital, and of course I'm not going to divulge because HIPAA, right? But it was really scary just to hear all of her comorbidities played a part, and she ended up having to like go to the big ICU afterwards. So like she wasn't, like, by the time we left with the baby, she wasn't even well, and she had a number of kids, and I'm like, dang, like if she doesn't make it, what is going to happen to all of these babies? Like all of these babies are now going to be motherless. And so, I definitely think like spacing out the pregnancies, and, a lot of people are like, oh, I don't like birth control, but do something.
Yes. And if you've had a baby, your doctor should be asking you, right, while you are still in the hospital, what you are planning on doing for birth control.
Right.
And if they're not asking you, you should be telling them what your plan is. And it shouldn't just be at that time abstinence.
Yeah.
I mean, it should be, but it should also be something else.
The pull-out method is not
that does not.
It's not.
It does not.
That's
work.
ridiculous.
Yeah.
But like, we just timed it. No.
Yeah.
No.
And that's the other big thing. One of the number one risk factors for having a premature baby is already having a premature baby. So if you've already had a premature baby previously, you are at risk for having another premature baby. Yeah. And so it is important to talk about what birth control you're planning on doing right after you have, and it's temporary. Birth control is temporary unless you go for a tubal ligation, which is something different. But and even that's not permanent.
Yeah, like some people reverse.
Yeah, but and even sometimes something just skips by. But I mean, you should be, if your doctor doesn't ask you these things, you should be telling them. So what are my options for birth control now that I've had my baby?
Right, and that's really good because a lot of people don't know that.
Yeah.
So this is why we do this. This is so awesome.
Yeah.
Donna, do you have any more questions?
I don't. I've actually learned a lot.
Yeah, I'm like, I'm like, I can just listen to you. Like, we're like, Brittany already said she was coming back.
I will come.
Yes, you have to.
Yes. So, you guys, we hope that this was so informative for you.
Can I say one more thing?
Yeah.
One more thing. So, because you were mentioning that snapback, girl. Snapback.
Oh.
Let me just remind you, new moms out there, or those soon-to-be moms, it took 9 months, sometimes 10 months, to make your baby. It should take you 9 or 10 months.
Yeah, everybody's not
back.
Beyonce.
Yeah, you don't need to get back. There's no pressure to get back. Look at the princess. What is the Duchess? The Cambridge. What's her name?
Kate.
Yes.
I was like,
So let me tell you why I like her, because she came out postpartum and she still had that belly and she was totally rocking it, and that is completely okay. Yeah. Be happy with your body.
Beyonce your body with flowers and her babies.
Yes.
No, but now she has a little like pooch or whatever, and people were trying to insinuate that she was pregnant, and she was like, "No, I woke up like this."
Yeah. When she had twins.
Yeah, you were like, and she's 36 years old.
Your body does amazing things. Yeah. You can literally grow another being or beings inside of you. Yes. You're not supposed to look the same, and that is completely fine. Just own it. Just own it. Yes. That's all I had to say.
Oh, that's okay.
Different kind of snapback. Mommy snapback.
Yeah. You should divulge about sharing with the blues or snacking with the blues. So if you guys want more Brittany,
oh no!
If you guys want
that
more
is just
of
completely
Brittany,
for fun.
If you guys want more Brittany, her and her husband do this thing. It is amazing. You have to follow her on Facebook.
Oh my goodness!
They have this thing called Snack
So there's
Crate.
this thing called Snack Crate.
Oh my gosh!
You might see advertisement for it. It's this company that you send them some money, and then monthly they will send you a box with snacks from different parts of the world, and then they'll send you some fun facts in there, and then they'll share with you. And I feel so bad. It's diabetes in a box. I'll just let you know that. But it's just fun. It's a fun thing. I try to balance it out with drinking plenty of water and eating stuff, but this is like my divulging thing. So once a month they send us this box, and me and my husband will open this box. And
shout out to Brandon, because I literally the tear emojis. That is me watching them eat this stuff.
It's interesting to see what people like in different countries.
Yeah, like the Cheeto things that you guys just said.
Oh man,
they were like, this is disgusting.
They made flavors out of. They made chicken chips.
Yeah,
and it was not.
Funny.
It was not good.
It is hilarious.
It was not for me.
Yeah,
but balance it out.
Snacking with the blues. Is
my favorite. But I'll be back. We'll talk about.
Yeah,
we have tons of.
We're gonna get Brandon
to talk about.
We're gonna get Brandon to come on. We've already committed. Your wife already committed. Brandon's gonna come on because he's an oncologist, so he deals with cancer and cancer patients. So I think he'd be awesome with October coming up. Just to talk about screenings and the different types of things, especially because our men do not, you think we don't take care of ourselves, our men do not take care of themselves, and we are coming through with Dr. Brandon Blue.
Yeah.
Yes. So thank you guys again for tuning into Your Health is Lit.
Yes.
Another segment. We're going to get t-shirts soon, y'all. Y'all are not.
We need to.
We are. We're about to get t-shirts soon. So if you have any questions, comments, concerns, Dr. Blue is actually a member of the group.
Yes.
So feel free to comment below and get your questions answered that are appropriate. We already told y'all the rules. Y'all know the rules.
What is inappropriate?
Inappropriate is asking you stuff that they should be asking their doctor.
Yes.
That's inappropriate.
And that will be my default. If at the end of the day, you should discuss it with your doctor. But if it's simple stuff, I don't mind.
Yeah, inappropriate is oh, girl, so I got this thing. Take a picture of a rash and post it. No.
But if you, if you were like me, so I was trying to find a place to get my daughter a flu shot this year. And she hasn't been seen by her primary yet because she's not due for her well-child visit. And she can't get in for an immunization.
Right.
So I had to find places where they give flu shots.
Publix and get the $2 free gift card.
So they can't because she's only 20 months. And so there's an age limit. So actually the health department, you can go there and and it's free at the health department.
Yeah.
If you're less than 18, you can get a flu shot there. But we can provide resources on places like
absolutely.
that. And I'm sure there are places, are there crisis nurseries here? And
I'm not actually sure. We should look into that. The Crisis Nursery is a place in St. Louis where if you have a child that's going through a crisis, or you and your family actually volunteered there, are going through a crisis, they have food, they have case managers, they have clothing. In special circumstances, the kids can stay.
And they can provide you a little bit of respite. Yeah. So we'll look up stuff like that.
Yeah. You should create a resource guide.
Yes.
A resource guide.
Yes.
Yeah. So we're always thinking about you guys. So we are so excited to just have Dr. Blue as a part of our team. And we will see you at the next session. Like, we have so much stuff coming up for October. Breast cancer, dental hygiene, Bell's palsy. We're here for
domestic violence.
Yes. We are. October is going to be full. So we are so excited and so glad that we could get you in today. Thank you for taking time out of your schedule.
Oh, thanks for having me.
I know you have babies and
thank you
so much. So we really appreciate it. And we will holler at you guys.